All right. Hi, everybody.
Hey, welcome back. Today we're here talking about the circle maker again. We're diving into part 3, which is the third circle, think long.
Yeah. So I feel like this book is really just speaking to where I am in life in terms of trying to really focus my prayers and focus on what God is saying to me at I feel like one of the most, kind of pivotal times of my life. So I am so appreciative of this book. And I feel like a broken record kind of saying every time I pick it up that I get tearful reading the experiences and just thinking about how powerful God is and how he's moving.
Yeah. What I liked about this one is just the idea of thinking long, like as we continue to get older and grow in our faith, now we're in the long game. And I feel like that is what has always that's what really convicted me about this part of the book is like it's no more of, it's not a microwave, it's
Yeah.
like a slow cooker. And so like how do we participate and engage in God and in prayer in the long run?
Yeah.
So one of the things that, starting right off, he says is like a prayer is planting and our prayers bear fruit for forever. And so again, thinking long. And I think sometimes when we pray, we don't always think long. We're praying for like right now, but we're not thinking about our children or their children's children, and that's what prayer is really about.
Right. And I think the fact that he titles the first chapter in part 3 as long and boring, because sometimes it does seem like either you are praying the same old prayer or saying the same things or having the same desire. And like you said, it could be years that you are asking for God to answer that prayer. And we do, I think, have so many other luxuries in life that afford us the opportunity of a quick fix,
Mm-hmm.
that things are instant.
Yeah.
And then we forget that God doesn't work that way, and only can kind of like find appreciation in that when we see why, or,
Yeah.
kind of see things slowly manifest and kind of understand why God may have done it that way.
Yeah, and I like the title of the chapter you mentioned, long and boring, because I think that's what I also appreciate about the book is just the realness of the journey is that some things are just long and boring. And this is a process. And like you said, we're praying, we're coming over the same things over and over. And one thing he said, one dimension of thinking long is thinking differently.
Mm-hmm.
And just how, countercultural that is to just continuously engage in something that may seem like it's just going on and getting nowhere. But that's how God works.
Right. Right. He says, like, if you pray long and boring prayers, your life will be anything but boring. Your life will turn into the spiritual adventure it was destined to be. It won't always get you where you want to go, but it will get you through. And I think that is so true. I think in reading this chapter, I was reflecting on my own life and how kind of things that I desired a couple of years ago are now starting to manifest, and that I can be so appreciative of them in a way that I don't think I would have had they happen instantly and had they happen when I was asking for them to happen.
Yeah. I think that is so true. And one of the things that stood out to me because we both are, we're both planners, and it's just like one prayer can accomplish more than 1,000 plans. And I'm
Yes. I highlighted that and underlined it.
you're right. And I think I wrote down in my own journal that I'm going to be reflecting on more of over the course of the week is just dream big, pray hard, and think long.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you know, just remembering it's long term.
Mm-hmm.
It's long term. And I think that is just so hard and something that I got to get really in my spirit because another thing he says is the ability to pray urgency about things. Or actually, no. But anyway, going back to that, like I just need to get that in my spirit. That it is long. We're just like he said, like in the Bible, they refer to a lot of the things refer to like farming and the farming process. Mm-hmm. And like how can we adapt that mindset? And I think that's something I just don't know how to do.
Right.
I don't know how to like slow bake unless I think of like slow cooking and then I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. I'm in a crock pot.
Yeah. I mean, what's funny is I can equate, and oftentimes when I'm talking with students that I supervise around the therapeutic process,
Mhm.
I'll say, like, our job is to plant the seeds, and we may not always be around or present to watch them grow. But that's very hard to adapt in your own life when there are things that you are planting that you want to, you know, cultivate and like see the fruit of. It's
Yeah.
very hard to think long,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing, which I think goes into like just our lives and what we're talking about now is like if you plant yourself in one place and let your roots grow deep, there's no limit to what God can do. And I think
Right.
as I like navigate, where just I want to be like physically located or like how can I just stay in one place and really let my roots grow deep, like that really, really spoke to me too.
Agreed. Yeah, I think especially because I have been one who has moved around a lot for education, for family. And now thinking about settling down and setting roots actually made me very nervous.
Mhm.
Especially kind of in the area that I am. It's an area that I feel like I'm drawn to, but
Mhm.
but establishing those roots is scary. That's a scary thing to kind of think about. But like you said, the impact and the reach can be so farther than we've ever predicted. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to stay stuck there, but
Yeah.
that we need to establish some roots so that God can kind of do work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think just for anyone interested in this book, I think too, just like I said, the thought of it being like long and boring and just recognizing and accepting that that's a part of the process because he said like um the long and boring process will translate into someone else's miracle and like just remembering that.
Right.
Like when we think we prayed that thing for the like 99,000 times, you know, but once you get to that miracle, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I think I really kind of latched on to the fact that he talks a little bit about his father-in-law and the reach of his father-in-law's ministry in this book. And he talked about a time when his father-in-law, before he became his father-in-law, came and prayed for him.
Mhm.
And he made this statement. He had a familiarity with God that was disarming, and he had a faith in God that was reassuring. And I was like, wow, like I'd love to be able to have that familiarity with God that allows folks to say, wow, like she knows the Lord,
Yep.
and to be able to have a faith in God that is reassuring, like people being able to trust not only that when I pray that God listens, but that when they, if I'm saying to them that when you pray God will listen as well, that they can believe that because of the level of faith and belief that I have and what God is able to do. So that was
Yeah.
really encouraging.
And even going, continuing thinking about like his father-in-law, something that I like that he said too was like sometimes the physical contact creates the spiritual conduit. And I think like
Mhm.
of the community that we're building or just,
Yes.
the friends in your circle, like actually physically being there or talking to someone on the phone and just like the power in that.
Right.
The power in saying, how can I pray for you this week and writing that down and actually like praying for that person and for that thing and like how we've tapped into that over the years. And I really, really, that really resonated with me because that is what it's all about too. It's like where two or three are gathered, even if it's just two and we agree on this thing, we can really move mountains. And so the fact that he highlighted that was like, so really, really stuck with me.
Agreed, agreed. Thinking a little bit even further, and I'm not sure how much deeper into part three it is, but it made me think about the prayer circle that he talked a little bit about that the young lady established,
Mhm.
and really thinking about how big that can be in very small circles or even fractured circles, and thinking, like you said, about even this community in terms of praise, like that's really what we're all about is joining in prayer and learning how to pray, learning how to be supportive in relationship around prayer.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited about even kind of doing a prayer challenge. I think the way that he describes it,
Mhm.
even within our group, I think that could be so powerful.
Yeah, because there's definitely power in numbers and persistency. And I like how he highlighted that too. Another thing that he mentioned that really speaks to our group and the work that we're doing is he says, he talks about the importance of having a daily rhythm with God.
Yes.
And he says one of the reasons that many people don't feel an intimacy with God is because they don't have a daily rhythm with God. And so I think, like he just said, it opens the lines of communication. It gets us started off on the right foot. And I know in my own personal practice, if I don't start my day with the word, the day is chaotic.
Yes.
And it gets chaotic fast. And even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it is, really priming ourselves, we're either priming ourselves in a positive or a negative way.
Exactly. That was something that was really meaningful for me, especially thinking about as things get busier. And I think it's so important. And I think what God is really trying to say to us as we develop relationship with him is like, this is super important to do and establish now, right now, while like you haven't seen me give you the wildest of your dreams, the wildest of your desires. Like I want you to develop that consistency and relationship with me first, because you may not have the time, or you may not find the time, should I continue to bless you. And every blessing leads to more challenges. But if we develop that posture, develop that practice now, it's going to be so important as we continue to be challenged and pressed. And so that was something that even convicted me, because I feel like in this season, I started to pick up in terms of being busy. And like you said, there have been a couple of days where I have not started like fresh out of the bed my day with God, and I've maybe had my tea and even read an email before it's like, oh, okay, I need to do my devotion, and it throws the day off. And I love the way he talked about it, how he said it really helps him to then prime everything that he does throughout the rest of the day through God's lens.
Yeah.
Right. And I thought that was so powerful, and probably without thinking, that is what the starting your day with God will do.
Yeah, and he talked about even like praying through his calendar instead of just getting through it. And also the importance of people, developing their own routines. What works for me might not work for you, but whatever it is, you need that routine, you need that daily rhythm with God, so that way you are in a great place. And he said you're laying out your requests and you're waiting expectantly. And so that really stood out to me too within this one. And something else that I think connects to the beginning part, and just going back to this idea of thinking long, he says praying hard and thinking long equals staying focused. And I know I'm someone who can lose focus really quickly. And so going back to the beginning of the book where he kind of talked about, narrowing our focus a bit, how we make decisions in life, and like how we go about things, and like how can we pray hard and stay focused. And so that equation, he put it in the book, praying hard plus thinking long equals staying focused. Is something else that I really want to like continue with as well.
Agreed. And I like what you said, and what the author said as well, around finding our own ritual and our own routine. And I think oftentimes, especially when we are starting out in faith, like we're looking at what season folks are doing and kind of saying, okay, what part of that do I need to adopt? Do I need to be, fresh down on the floor, face down for an hour? Is that a part of what I need to adopt? Do I need to go into my prayer closet, for 2 hours? And really kind of saying, what is it that works for you? Like I have a part of the routine, and I think we've talked about this before. And while our routines may have similar components, they're very different, but they work for us in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. And I feel like when you get to the place where you have developed your own routine, it makes coming before God more consistently more likely.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I agree. And I think sometimes I struggle with like, do I have to do the same things every day? And so I'll experiment some days, but like you got to get into some type of flow. And like you said, I do think because I have a flow, something happens every day.
Right.
And sometimes multiple times within a day too. So I think that's awesome.
Right. He asked some really good questions and big questions around like, where do you dream big? When do you pray hard? What helps you think long? And thinking about the times, places, and practices that help you do that.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I wanted to reflect on. I know for me, mornings are good.
Mhm.
Like, as the day starts to go, my energy goes down, my
Yeah.
commitment goes down. And so morning is the best time to catch me. And I feel like that's the best time for me to devote to God.
Yeah. 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 And I think the just building continue to building off of that, his next chapter, the speed of prayer,
Mm,
was one that just really built. So once you get those routines and habits established, it's like he talks about fasting in
yeah.
this chapter. And I think that is something that we've developed as we've gotten older and more spiritually mature. And I thought it was just like, I thought that was so important for him to bring that back for me in this season that I'm in right now, because I was like, oh, I haven't had a fast in a long time.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
he mentioned that like fasting is a form of praying hard. And he said that, some miracles are only accessible via prayer and fasting. And so I just was like, wow, wow, that is just so amazing. And so, like, how often do you connect the two of those together?
Mhm. Right. And I think one of the pieces that you mentioned is really important for us to think about is that those are things that we've heard growing up in the church, right? But those aren't things that we really adopted as we were younger. But now it's such a bigger thing that we kind of gravitate to or could gravitate to, and try to keep in mind is that fasting is such a big component. And I think that there's so much revelation that
Mhm.
can be in, kind of this period of fasting. And he even talked about like, when you are focused on the objective of fasting, it's a way to fast track kind of those prayers. It's a way to make a sacrifice and say, God, like we understand that you made the ultimate sacrifice. And here we are looking to make a sacrifice as we petition you for the desires of our heart and for you to reveal to us what's important to you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then he said, yeah, that really just stuck with me because I was like, wow, it's like, and he also talked in that same chapter about like, it's like when you're at bringing your absolute brokenness before God, and it's like
Mhm.
combining those two things. And sometimes we think, I know I used to have really mixed views about fasting, as a teenager and as
Mhm.
young adult, and like I've just seen like the power of it, it fast tracking those prayers, and also just bringing clarity and peace. And so I really, really highly recommend it for anyone that's interested in it. And I think it's like it could be as big or as small as you want, but I definitely think it brings a shift that you need sometimes.
Yeah, I know a lot of churches do the like Daniel's fast at the
Mhm.
beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And I think that that is probably a good place to start since it's outlined in such a way that you can follow. Um, but I think for me, I think about other things that are tempting that can take me away from kind of what God has, in terms of goals for me. So in reading this section, I immediately thought about my health and
Mhm.
how I'm like on this health journey. And that the Daniel's fast would be helpful in that because I tend to gravitate towards like carbs and things that I definitely shouldn't have, right? But even if it were to be something so small as to say like you're not going to eat, kind of like processed carbs, right? So I may still have meat, but pulling out that thing that pulls me further from God. And I think that's why when churches do fast, they say you can fast from like electronics, you can fast from sweets, you can fast from things that, again, pull you away from that relationship.
Yeah, and also things that you think that you can't live without. Because I'm with you, like
Right.
my church has done a Daniel fast before, but there have been times that I'm like, I'm not going to Dunkin' Donuts for the next 2 weeks. And like that is really hard for me, but that is what fasting is all about because it gives you the willpower. Again, we're thinking along, right? And so we got to have these little infusions where we're like resetting and cleansing and just where we can think long. And fasting develops that willpower. That's one of the things that he talked about too.
Yes. Yes. He talks about it not just purging his body, but also the mind
Mhm.
and spirit. Um, And even I think giving the example that if there's something that you've been praying long for, that you might want to incorporate fasting. So I think about, kind of not just my health, but the health of my family. But that's something that I've been praying about for years, but that I haven't incorporated a fast around that. And that was one of the things that, like, after reading this, it was like, okay, all right, the hands down, like that is what I'm going to do starting today,
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, wow, I have been praying about these things, but have I fasted around them yet? And I'm like, oh, maybe not. And even if you've done it before with whatever new season that you're in, getting that renewed sense is always, always a plus. You can't go wrong with that.
Exactly. Yeah, I really also appreciated the part where he talks about whether or not, like, where the Genesis and Revelation, the beginning and the end, are as far as praying, right? Do things start the moment that you start praying, or do they start when you are receiving? But he talks a little bit about that, like the Genesis, the beginning, is when you start to circle that, when you start to petition God, to move on your behalf, and that it may be a long time. Just if we think about the books of the Bible, right? In between Genesis and Revelation, there are a bunch of little things that happen in between, right? But that the revelation comes in the answered prayer, and that it actually, he talks about it being a yes and, right? So one begets the other, but that it also, when you have revelation, it starts a new beginning, which I was really appreciative of.
Yeah, and just as we, round out this section, one thing that he spoke of that really just sealed it was, like he said, to seal the victory, all it takes is a defining decision and a daily decision. And it's like, you may lose some battles, but we've already won the war. And like, just remembering that, like, we're going to lose some battles. And I think, again, I appreciate the realness of the book. It's like, he talks about a man who struggled with an addiction to pornography. Like, he would do well, then he would have a setback. He would do well, and then he'd have a setback. But in the end, he got the victory. And that's the same way for us. And so sometimes it can be frustrating to feel like we go through cycles of the same thing. But knowing that we're going to lose some of the battles, but we do win the war. And every day we're making defining decisions, we're making daily decisions that are leading us to a different destiny, is how he described it too. And
Right.
so, like, I think those are the things, again, thinking this is the long run here. And
Right.
so that's what you have to remember. And he even said, like in the scripture, it says the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And so fasting gives us more power to pray because it's an exercise in willpower. And he said, one thing that I wanted to really highlight, he said, pray through until you experience your breakthrough.
Yes.
And so, like, that's what we have to do.
Exactly. And that as long as you're trying, you're not failing, right? The minute you give up trying, that's when you failed. But every time that you are putting one foot in front of the other, you continue to say, I expect God to show up. I expect God to help me. And I am committed to getting it right. I'm committed to figuring it out. So
Yeah, I like that. I expect God.
yeah. Yeah, that's what you said. Pray with expectation.
I expect God to make it happen. Yeah, that's a word. That is a word.
Yeah, so I think the last chapter in this section talked a little bit about kind of the life goal list. And honestly, I was so encouraged by the story of John Goddard, who he started out with kind of writing down his life goals, and noting that he had something like 120 something goals and maybe only accomplished about 100 of them. But the idea was, like, if he had never written them down, if he had never really mapped them out and kind of took them out of his head and made them a reality on paper, then he may not have accomplished any of them. So it made me really think about some of the things that even God has been talking with me about, that I need to get them down and commit to making them goals.
Yeah, and he says in the book too, you'll never achieve the goals that you don't set. And, having godly goals keeps us praying hard, because it's the only way for us to dream big, right? Like, and he said, like, I think he said, kind of like, goals are, I wrote it down. What did he say? Oh, goals release the tension in our brain from where we want to be, to from where we are to where we want to be. And so like just remembering that it's so important to have them written down. I'm like you, like my church has done something similar where they have like, I'll show you guys, like a little list of goals. I don't
Mm,
know if you see it, but like my church did something similar, having goals in different categories. And I haven't done that in a while. And so it really made me think about, what kind of financial goals, experience goals. I like the experience goals one. I hadn't seen that defined that way before.
right.
Physical goals, influence goals, family goals. And so having those goals in different categories, and I think doing it that way makes it seem almost less overwhelming, but it also helps you to not just have goals that are career focused or just family focused or just health focused, but really like a well-rounded picture for your life.
Right. And what was really helpful was for him to highlight why there isn't, or why he didn't suggest a spiritual goals section, and kind of saying, like, if my posture and I know that my heart is to please God, there's a spiritual component to the goals that I set in each of these sections,
Yeah.
right? Because I think for me, even the last time that I can remember setting goals, I did set some spiritual goals that well, I seem to be working towards around the goal and not as focused around the process and the relationship. And I think that is what I appreciated also about what he highlighted, is it's not necessarily the achieving of all the goals, but even the process that life takes you to get to them. And there are so many things you learn along the way.
Yeah, that process is key. Well, we are definitely loving this book.
Yeah.
Um, it continue. I'm looking forward to like writing down some goals, get engaging in some fasting. And I definitely recommend it. We're almost through. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. And then we have just one more section left. One more
That's
section.
it. Just one more.
Stay tuned. Tell us your thoughts or what you're thinking. What do you think about the long game?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we'd be interested if there's a book either that you're reading that you like, or a book that you suggest that we go through next. We'd love to hear those too. So drop them in the comments, and we'll see you next time.
Bye bye, everyone.